Afternoon all, how we doing? Change of scenery. I've got a load of Leeds paraphernalia all around me, Leeds Football Club, because I'm over at my accountant's for the day, and so hope you can still hear me. Hope the signals, it actually looks like signals stronger than at our place, so that's one good thing. Although I'm over in Yorkshire, which always makes me a little bit on edge as a proud Lancastrian, so forgive me if I'm off form. But I know a man who won't be off form, because that's Matt Phillips, who's loitering in the lobby, hopefully not making a scene. I can see him sort of flexing. He was dancing away to the theme music, etc. So I'll bring him in without further ado, and we'll chew it over with the legend that is Matt Phillips. Matt, can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear, mate.
Nice one, fantastic. So I don't know. There might be a few fools that don't know who you are. So we'll just make sure that we bring them up to speed. But tell folk who you are and what you do.
So I'm hoping there are some people who don't know me. Otherwise, this is going to be a waste of time. But yeah. So my name is Matt Phillips. Formerly, years ago, when I first met Matt, Jack, probably about 2013, 14. I was sport injury Matt, and since then, in contrast to Jack, who's gone to great things, all I've achieved is change my name to Runchat Live. But that's basically, it was a few years ago. And yeah, I've gone down the route from going to sports therapist, 100% clinician, into more education. At one time, I was going around the country doing workshops aimed at both therapists and runners to try and put some evidence back into running injury and performance. And then with the digital kind of age and realizing I could reach people without having to jump on the train, it became the podcast, which is live and brings in people, 52 people so far from around the world, to try and help do exactly that, put some evidence back into an industry, an area which still needs it.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I've some of you that might listen on a regular basis know how anxious I get about whether or not this is working. So please do drop us some comments on the chat if you can hear us loud and clear. If you have any questions for Matt, then do let us know, or any questions and comments generally that you feel you want to talk about either today or in the future. Looks like my signal might be glitching a little bit, so apologies if that's the case. If I drop off, then Matt, you just need to hold fort. What I wanted to mention is that when we met, it's going to be probably 6 years ago when we first met, and I remember, I say this, and those will have heard me say it before, so it's certainly genuine when I say that you're just certainly one of the people in the running game that I admire and look up to the most, and have learnt the most from in that space, especially just the pragmatic application of principles. I'm certainly no academic myself, and so I'm looking for sometimes voices that can offer a translation of material and evidence and understanding, but then also how that translates into practice. And I remember saying to you way back when about how I just wanted you to make sure that you didn't, whilst you were evaluating things, and often many of us are sort of fraught with the imposter syndrome that comes with being exposed to all these great thinkers, is that I wanted to make sure that you didn't stop pushing yourself forward and recognizing your own role within that. Now, I come to regret that to some extent, because what you've then done is simply compete in the interview and education space in such a way that intimidates me greatly. But you've decided to flex into that in such a way that then has meant that you've carved a real interesting market in the running game. I even have friends of mine that are just runners that then listen to your material, then were disappointed when I was on the show, etc. That's why they get in touch. It's like, what are you doing? You've actually ended up on my favorite podcast. And so how's that been going, this sort of new side of it with Runchat Live, and how did it evolve from what you were doing before?
I think it's throughout life I've just gone from wall to wall to bang my head against, and it's I don't know, it's something about my personality likes that, the challenge. But yeah, one of the things that's always frustrated me since, like, back in that national convention we all kind of appeared at, and when Twitter was kind of taking off, is the overcomplication of things with regards to therapists. And if there's one thing common amongst all the guests I choose, it's people who I feel are great communicators to runners. So when I give them, like, what do you want of me, Matt? What's the idea? What's the go of the show? The idea is, right, well, you need to give me a show which is going to appeal to both the therapist and also to a runner, and they're going to get something from it, which is often difficult for some people, if not impossible. But the idea is that, with Runchat Live, the runner who's interested could listen, and there'll be a little bit of kind of technical stuff, but the idea is that it's translated into a form they can understand. Because I think that's one of the biggest problems in our industry, particularly with a lot of sports and just with healthcare in general, is therapists and the patients are not on the same page. And often that's because the therapists aren't even asking the patient what they want or what the problem is. It's always like straight away, this is wrong with you. I know how to fix this. I've done a course, and we know where that leads. So yeah, that's been the goal of Runchat Live, and it still is. And the feedback I get generally, I mean, last year's conference, one of the bits of feedback was from some runners and personal trainers. At times it went a little bit too technical. Not in your presentation, that was fantastically simple to understand. But yeah, so this year I'm really making sure that all the speakers have been told, you just don't dumb it down, but make sure you translate it. And it's tricky because even now it's natural for us to say, oh yeah, well, when you're looking at the medial calcaneus, and it's like, well, hold on, you've just lost all the runners now. Why do we even use that language? Why do we, half the time, why do you even have to learn it?
Exactly.
So that's the idea anyway.
Heel bone would do. Yeah, I was certainly no risk of me ever being too technical, is there? That's one thing that's good. Yeah, that was easy for you. It just felt really easy for us to understand. It's like, well, yeah, because I was never going to be able to juice it up. What I want to talk about then is Runchat Live's conference, because last year, certainly I've been to loads of events, and the good, bad, and the ugly of CPD. But that really was a who's who of great thinkers in that space. I certainly was a bit of an imposter, but fortunately you'd put me into a topic that was sort of a framing piece in and around sort of cutting through nonsense, etc., rather than it being on a running specific topic. So that felt like I had some appropriate place. But it really it gave me heart that those sorts of events are still incredibly important. You can have podcasts, you can have ongoing conversations, you can have interviews, but some of the material delivery and the panel discussions and just hashing that out over a more specialist subject, it just really re-energized me in that direction. Now you've got the challenges that have come from event running is that, it's generally speaking, with all the measures that have come off the back of the pandemic, you've had to adjust. But I'm really excited for the lineup that you've got for this year's event. So talk us through it and tell us how we can get tickets to that.
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, what I love about all my guests, and you were a guest on Runchat Live, is the modesty. So thank you for putting yourself down and keeping the tradition of my guests. You were a brilliant opener for the whole conference. It was always going to be you because you just set the scene. I mean, you are the Physio Matters podcast. So, back in the day, you were probably one of the first to actually said, right, let's get some evidence out there. So just not letting you put yourself down too much. It's not fair on you. But so, yeah, I mean, last year was amazing. If I was a good business person, then Runchat Live would be the biggest thing in the world, but I'm not. And that kind of, when the person putting the website together, because it's going to be on therapistlearning.com, which is fantastic. Now we know it's all going to be online. They kind of said to me, oh, one thing, Matt, have you got any testimonials from last year? And I was like, oh, yeah, good point. I'll have a look back. And I looked back at my emails from October 2019. And of course, there was like about, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 testimonials.
Yeah,
Have I ever used them? Have they been placed anywhere from my inbox? No, they weren't at all. So unfortunately, well, maybe it's fortunate. Maybe that's what keeps Runchat Live real. I don't know. I'm not that great a business person. But anyway, this year it's going to be all online, which is a shame because it's supposed to be Runchat Live and not Runchat. Here's another list of presentations all strung together and put in a package. But that said, the content is still going to be amazing, and it is all going to be alive. Like some speakers who are used to other conferences have said, oh, maybe we just send over a recording or something. That'd be simpler, less mistakes, Matt. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work. I want there to be mistakes.
No,
I want kids to be breaking in the back door.
No. A different event, yeah.
Because I think that's an important part of it. If you're a credible speaker, I know the logistics of it, and probably something will go wrong. But the logistics, what I'm trying to sell is that to be a great therapist, to be able to communicate, you got to be a teacher who's standing in front of a class, not somebody who's organized something, edited it, changed it, put it together. No. So all my speakers are going to be speaking live from their homes. And it's going to be continuous. I'm going to be on from 8:30 in the morning till 5:45 or 6 o'clock in the evening in the intervals. There's going to be people dropping in, past speakers and people from the industry, chatting, saying hello, letting us know what they're up to. So it is still going to be different. And that was my biggest goal, just to make sure. I want people to think I'm not just going to dip into one and then get on with my day. People need to actually take 2 days off and book it out as 2 days of CPD. Because even in the intervals, even in the lunch break, where I'm going to stay on and have my lunch in front of everybody and invite various special people who are going to pop in and say hi, that's going to be quality CPD as well. Because just talk, just listening and sharing.
Well, it needs to. I like that, because what you achieved last year was just a truly immersive experience. Like, apart from, unless people were wanting to tweet about it, people just struggled to keep their phone in their hand, because it was so, not just when the sessions were on, which were obviously really interesting, but just the atmosphere and the community around Runchat Live it's so appropriately specialized. Not just because not in a specialist sense of like the nerdy stuff in and around running, of which there was some, but it was that translation piece, and all of us as a community trying to think, right, how do we mastermind better care for patients, but also how can we better instill good running practices for injury and performance measures, and everyone there, and you know, it's because it's sort of an extension of your personalities. It's like, it's such a melting pot. We're all sometimes so confused, but let's talk it out together. That atmosphere, I'm confident that we're going to be able to emulate that online this time, and it will be adjusted, but it certainly won't be samey. And that's what everyone seemed to take from last year's event. And so if anyone's got any interest in running injury, running performance, but also in whatever capacity it might be, as a therapist, as a runner, as an interested party in the industry, then that specialized look and the ability to just down tools and just think in that direction amongst like minds it's such a brilliant opportunity. And so I'm really excited for what comes from this year. What I do want to know, though, is when you're picking, I know what it's like to organize events, etc., but when you're picking stuff like this and you're that specialized aspect, how tough are the choices for the slots, and how do you do the research to actually build such a program as you've got?
It's interesting, because last year, basically, I just chose the 10 people who've had the most impact. Well, I chose 9 people who've had the most impact on my life and you. And I put them all together and thought, these are the 10 people. So, which turned out to be kind of great, especially for me. And one of the biggest moments for me was just bringing people together in real life. It was like Christopher Johnson from Seattle shaking hands with Derek Griffin from Ireland, Simon Bartold from Australia meeting JF Asculia from Canada for the first time, even though they've been talking to each other and debating across the internet for probably 10 years. Yeah. So it was amazing. And that was a beautiful thing. And I was quite down when I thought that's not going to happen this year. Sure. Matt Fitzgerald is one of the speakers, and I was so looking forward to bringing him to Brighton, to be in the same room as any runner. You know, it was just such an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as a case for all the speakers. But so this year, when it came to choosing speakers, suddenly I thought, okay, I can't just choose all the people I like. It's just, that's nice for me, but there's actually an audience out there as well. So I went very much more by topics and areas of the industry which are important and emerging. And by doing that and looking at topics, then the people turn up that way around. So I'm hoping that this year's presentations, that's been the feedback I've got. For example, women's health is a big topic and has been for the last year, thanks to the work produced by, well, Granny Donnelly, according to you, but Grania Donnelly, Emma Brockwell and Tom Goom, with the publication they put out, the guidelines to return to running. So Emma, well, it was meant to be Grania as well, but she couldn't come. So Emma's going to be standing up there and talking about that, which is fantastic, leader in the research at the moment in the field, and other areas as well. I mean, I have got some favorites back who I still think kind of command, as far as I'm concerned, the area, like Ben Cormack we've got this year, I wanted last year. He's very much going to be talking about pain and movement. We've got, let me just refresh my mind and think. I mean, the podiatrist was hugely popular last year, and that's something which still, I think if there's one profession where physios and sports therapists think, oh no, this is too much for me, let's hand it over to someone else, it tends to be podiatry, particularly with runners, the fear of do they have an insole or not, how important is shoes. So Trevor Pryor this year, who's, you know, completely up there with Simon Bartold, and Ian Griffiths from last year, will be presenting information on shoes and orthotic devices and stuff. But it's the content. Claire Minshall, strength training for runners, is a massive topic, which finally therapists are kind of understanding now thanks to kind of Mike James
You've
last
been banging
year.
that drum for so long. I bet it's
Yeah.
reassuring that that's starting to break through. Claire Minshall, Andy McCauley, you and Mike James have been making that noise for a while. Nick Grantham. It feels like there is a real turning the tide there, and so you must be delighted because it's probably the first words I ever heard from you, Mo.
But it's interesting as well because I think like when I was chatting to Dr. Ben O'Nig in a couple of episodes back, I mean, there's a guy who's been doing research for 35, 40 years, and he's still moving from papers from 86 and thinking, I've still got something I've got to test on that, and still looking for answers. And that kind of hit home to me the message that, last year we were talking about strength training, but now we've got a bunch of therapists who give out strength training, but they're just kind of handing out either overcomplicating it or just handing out 3 sets of 10 or whatever. So every time you get some information out there, then you need to come back and address it again. So that's what's happening this year. A lot of the themes introduced last year, for example, and this was probably one of my highlights from last year, was actually a certain discussion between, fueled by you, I think, myself, and the kind of fascia lovers down in the audience. If you remember that, it was great. I think it was. There was a few questions. In fact, Anna Maria was here. In fact, it was you against Anna. We could do it again here.
I remember it well. No, I mean,
and it was a bit uncomfortable at times.
Me and Anna have got, our relationship has gone from strength to strength in that moment. Absolutely.
Look what that's led to. Yeah. I don't want to say that was the catalyst for it.
It was. Absolutely. Catalyst. No, you might not want to say it, but it was. Yeah.
Well, it did. I mean, this year, definitely. I mean, later on today, I'm chatting with Anna Maria and Matt Scarsbrook, and we're going to be on the Massage Matters podcast. And I like to think inside, even though it's the first time I've said it out loud, that hopefully last year, where there was that question, well, hold on, you got 10 speakers. Why is there not one massage therapist up there? That really hit home to me. And I was like, so this year, they asked for a massage therapist, and I'm bringing Alice Sanvita, who might not be exactly what they expected with a hashtag shit that massage therapists say, but she is a fantastically huge
she's great.
Person and really influential. So she'll be there this year.
Anna's just wanting us to clarify there were two different things that me and Anna ended up having a really interesting back and forth in and around sort of hands-on care, which was good. But then it wasn't about fascia. That was more with some of the podiatry fraternity. But it was just a really interesting discussion that was occurring from panel to audience, and it's worth mentioning that was such a good example of how it really was that community, right? It felt inappropriate for there to be a stage. You don't care about the furniture sometimes, but it was kind of that everyone in the audience felt involved in what felt like a 70-person round table, and that's how it should feel. I know that me and you, one of the first times we met was, not the first time we met, but the first time we really spent much time together was on a Greg Lehman course and stuff that you'd hosted, and that atmosphere that we enjoyed on that weekend is something that felt like it had been emulated, where it's like all voices really count here because we're all trying to solve this conundrum together. And no one should feel inappropriate to challenge and stuff. And that atmosphere was brilliant. I just want to ask the live audience that might be tuning in. We get some people live, some people tuning on their commutes, etc. So feel free to post comments after the fact, either on the podcast, etc. We get that out on the podcast feeds. But for those that are tuning in live, we're not going to move too far away from necessarily Runchat Live as a conference now, but I'm just going to want to take 10 minutes to pick Matt's brain over some running related injury and performance stuff. And so if you've got any burning questions, then please send them in, or anything you'd like me to put to Matt or for him to reflect on. But one of my questions, Matt, when it comes to something you've mentioned already, which is that there might be some movements in a positive direction with regards to strength and conditioning, but sometimes excessive specificity sometimes comes for it, and such that people sometimes want to take what is the latest thing and then move it through what they perceive to be a really niche expert lens and start to be really infer that their specific flavor of something is the be-all and end-all. Now, when it comes to, here be the question really, is that when it comes to injury, I feel quite comfortable, and your work has really helped me to understand a bit of relativism around that space, where it's like you really can't make bold claims based on evidence to suggest that any specific model is better than another. Really, we've got to go for broad principles, and then the individual N of one is based on that whole person's needs and goals. But when it comes to performance, it's just not my space, and so I end up wanting to ask you as to whether or not you feel that the evidence is pointing towards any specific things or any styles of practice that are better than others in the performance aspect, and how different is that to injury prevention research?
That's a really good question. Really, really good. I mean, it's very difficult. Studies lack in performance because it's so difficult pinning anything down. It's so multifactorial. I mean, even injuries difficult, but it's easier to kind of do trials and tests and studies on injury than with performance. It's practically impossible with performance to have everybody, all the other variables kind of like leveled out. But I kind of think that I mean, the main thing coming out of therapy these days, as well as distinctions and barriers and boundaries between different types of practitioners kind of blending in. So these days it's addressing going to seek the person as opposed to the osteopath or the chiropractor or the sports therapist or the physio.
Definitely.
I think also we're realizing now that although it's really important to have an idea of the sport of the person you're working with, so in my case, my history's been running, so it's with runners, it's all very much becoming everywhere, even just with a non-athletic population, very patient center focused. It's all about now asking the questions to the individual. The whole biopsychosocial framework has opened up the fact that we need to kind of still consider the bio, but very much take into consideration everything else about the state of the person and the environment they find themselves in. So I think, again, even when it comes to measuring even something like performance, the whole thing about seeing the low-hanging fruits is there as well. It's the same way as with injury, you would stay away from trying to grasp at things like type of shoes and what part of the foot's hitting the ground and that sort of stuff. With performance, again, you're looking at things like recovery, with sleep, with nutrition, with all of this kind of. For the first time in ages, we can actually truly use the word holistic again without feeling like we're telling people to hug a tree. It's actually come back now, and I think it's quite a valuable word. I don't know how long for, but I think that's the best word to use here. It is. And if you're really going to help a runner of any level, it's addressing those things, the low-hanging fruits of which probably they've forgotten about, because as with injury, they're being bombarded every day with quick fixes and magic bullets and stuff. And also just being the other big thing I think about being a successful clinician these days is just not being afraid to be wrong and realizing that it's not black and white, and feeling confident in front of your client to say, you know what, we're going to try this. If it doesn't work, then fine, at least we can rule that out, and then we'll do this. That's what everybody should be saying these days, because it is a guessing game. And whilst we're dealing with human beings, I'm pretty sure it will always be a guessing game, because humans are so complex. We're never going to have a handbook like a car has or something.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I mentioned that at the start, and your disposition is such that you're that way out. You are inquisitive, but also, I mean, it's funny, you were stroking your beard before you had one. You were always that guy that was doing it. When we met, you didn't have that magnificent beard, and you were still someone that I whenever I think about you, I see you stroking your chin. Is because you have always had that about you. It's not as if you've kind of come to that. I mean, maybe you used to, you tell me stories of your youth, and maybe you were arrogant and brash, but I've always sort of had that. You've had that influence, that sort of wise influence on me and others. But what I want to try and just for the last few minutes, I'm going to be a swine and say that if I was to use an example about where there might be a case for something stronger in the performance game than there is in the injury game, let's just go for running form and say I'd be confident on my take on that. But when it comes to, say, running form and, say, the just the metabolic costs and the efficiency and things like that might come from it, where there might be a stronger case for moving someone towards a different type of form. Whereas when it comes to sort of, apart from in specific cases, you wouldn't want to necessarily, I'm all for tinkering with people's form for injury reasons, but when someone comes to me uninjured and said, I want to run in a way that is going to decrease my injury when there's no injury history, then I'm a big relativist in that space, where I'm like, you run how you run, and don't be making mistakes to try and aspire to run a specific way for injury reasons. Whereas for performance reasons, I'm often told that is something that there is more room in that direction. Do you feel that that's a fair representation?
If I've understood the question correctly, I think I'd say no. I don't. I think we're as guilty as we are with injury in trying to standardize how people should run. We're guilty of just recognizing when things have worked, when we've told people to stand more upright, or when we've tried to get both knees pointing in the same direction. I think, again, it's a bit of a game. There's common characteristics to successful running forms out there, but there's still variation even amongst elites, and the variation gets bigger and bigger the further you move down towards recreational. And in the years that I've been doing gait analysis, is a clear movement away from, 10 years ago, it was like everybody just looking at the amount of pronation and filming and trying to look at particular structural things going on and knees pointing in the same direction. But these days, and I write about it a lot, the gait analysis can't just be get on the treadmill, let's look how you run. The gait analysis, like any consultation, will start with a subjective for probably 45 minutes. And that's where all the answers are going to be. The actual way they run for me is similar to looking at what type of shoes they wear, or it's still very much at the top of the pyramid when you're looking at trying to help someone improve. It's only really when somebody is suffering from a niggle or a pain that you can say, okay, right, well, that's actually easier for me now because we got some ways we can play around here and offload that tissue. We can play with cadence because we're trying to do that and shift it away. But with performance, running form for me still sits, it cringes every time I see someone who's posted, makes me cringe every time I see a picture of somebody who's posted a video of a runner saying, what can you see? It's like, for me, that's like, it's the same as saying, anyone recommend some good shoes? It's an empty question, and really we got to stop doing that. If it's in a closed group and people are just kind of chatting and opening up debate, but you see nothing. Everybody moves. We're all so unique as human beings. Getting from A to B is such a unique way of doing it. And that's part of the problem. And that's where I think we've got such a high instance of runners, and probably runners who aren't achieving as much as they could do. Yeah,
because they're focusing on the wrong things. No, well, that's reassuring. As I say, I really genuinely can see a gap in my knowledge that maybe I'm painting with too broad a brush when I sometimes get accused of being a bit of a nihilist in that space, where sometimes I'm not one that wants to aspire anyone to what would be biomechanical or textbook normal or even optimal, because of the way in which I see things in my field of therapy with regards to pain. Whereas when it comes to performance, I'm not a running coach and won't aspire to be one. Even it's not my game. I like to run and I like working with runners, but it's not something that I want to overstep. But I have this understanding that there maybe is a gap with regards to efficiency and metabolic stuff that maybe I'm missing. Like James has commented, tinkering with form can help sometimes, for performance can help sometimes, but as always, it's bigger things to address first, usually, to improve performance in the majority. It sounds like that is a staunch agreement with you, Matt. We've not really got time to visit it in much detail, but David has said, does holistic cover all facets of therapy? So how are you using that word? Does it include all aspects of manual therapy and strength and conditioning?
For me, when I use holistic now, and I'm quite old, so it does make me cringe a little bit when I say the word and hear myself saying it. But for me, holistic means the whole person and also the environment they're in. It's everything, because we are, as well as being a product of what's inside us, we're also a product of what's around us. Mm-hmm. That's why we have to ask the questions to the runners. So holistic is everything. It's the relationships with the environment. It's anything you can attribute that's going to affect that person's life. Yeah,
that's it. Strength and conditioning, manual therapy, and crystals. Of course, there's
if they're going to see somebody for crystal work, then that's an important factor to take into consideration. It's true for other reasons, but you need to know about it and address it differently than you would do somebody else.
You're right. You're absolutely right. You do want to know, and weirdly, you might suddenly start to care about their horoscope if they do.
And also, the other thing I just want to say, because we do laugh about crystals and aura cleansing, and that's kind of where we come from. But listening to, I think it was Brendan Chaplin the other day I chatted to in the Sports Therapy Association, who's a great strength and conditioning coach. I've never chatted to him before properly, and that's the joy of my job as a chatter like you. And it really made me think, like, he works a lot with MMA athletes and stuff. And he was just saying, sometimes you've got to give that person what they want, even though it's not going to do anything. So with a lot of athletes, he just gives them some massive, let's turn over some lorry tires and hammer them, even though he knows that's not exactly what they need to achieve what they want to do in that point. You've got to give people a little bit of what they need, because that's the only way you're truly working with the person in front of you. And that made me kind of a little bit less critical and laughing at people and things they do, because holistic means, why is that person believing that crystal's going to help them? And maybe one day they won't, but maybe you continue helping them and let them believe that.
Absolutely. No, I think I end up, the big thing for me is about what association and attribution occurs from that. It's so, the crystals are benign. They're not doing anything, but then sometimes they can have a deleterious effect depending on what is being attached to them. And so, understanding that is key. I do agree. And
I love the fact we're talking about crystals and chewing it over.
I do, of course.
I can't wait for the outtakes of this.
It's going to get clipped. We're going to pay for that. Well, we are out of time, but let's summarize by saying, where can people find more information and then tickets to Runchat Live virtual conference?
So very excited that it was Eventbrite, but now it's on. Well, it's mainly on therapistlearning.com. So if you go to therapistlearning.com, which is kind of home of all the talks from Therapy Live, with its, how many was it, 12, 13, 14,000 people in the end? I can't remember how many it was.
22, mate. But,
22, yeah. Sorry to
22,000 people.
Demasculinize you. But yeah, so that's where all those are now. So I'm really thrilled to be working with the guys there. And if you go to therapistlearning.com, affectionately known as TL.C, if you the easiest thing is type Runchat Live in the courses, because it's down as a course because these people work with the CPD. And then up you'll find last year's chats, presentations, and you'll also find the fact that this year there's the English version, but also we're doing simultaneous translation to Spanish, which is something I'm kind of quite passionate about because I've got lots of Spanish friends and I've been doing some work in South America and stuff. So the whole of the conference this year will be with Natalia, who's going to be patiently translating everybody as they speak, which is a massive task for her. So yeah,
she'll be pleased I'm not speaking this year because how fast I speak. So I've had some hate before from translators that I've worked with where I've needed to slow down and I'll lose my train of thought when I go slow. So that's one good thing. Now I'm really excited. But Mike's noticed what I did this morning, which is that obviously being involved in TLC, I saw that there were 2 sales this morning. They're going to start going quick when people start realizing that's available. So very excited. And if you haven't already, then get your tickets to Runchat Live's conference. When is it again? Give us the date.
So 2 days across the 29th and 30th of October. And this isn't like a marketing thing, but because basically of Zoom that they're using there, it will be a cap on the tickets. So there will come a time where I think we've got about just over 100 left. So it sounds like a selling thing. But if you are interested, then don't put it off. Just get it now, because there will come a time where physically we just can't say. It won't be like other talks. They say we've got a maximum of 5,000. It's up to 15,000. We've now got 20,000. We can't do it because we're not paying that much for Zoom.
That's exactly
yeah, we got a maximum there.
That's exactly what we did last time. But yeah, we've been having to, because we set that precedent and people thought we were doing that with Therapy Live next one, the sport one. That is not the case. That is hard and fast. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes those goalposts get moved. But in this case, do snap it up. Yeah. And I can't recommend it highly enough. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for asking me.
And it's been great. I'm sure we'll chew it over on various other topics, especially after the fact. I definitely want you get you on to debrief. But as ever, I always really appreciate your time, mate.
Thank you very much. And thanks for all the work that you continue to do.
No bother. Pleasure. Speak to you soon, mate.
Take care. Thanks all. Thanks for listening.